Live. What's up, David? How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. How are you?
I'm all right.
Happy to be back here.
I know, right? Episode 3 of Acquired Taste. Welcome to our several listeners and viewers at this point. If you are a repeat viewer, you're our favorite person in the world. Send us a note. Today, we're going to actually introduce ourselves first because that's something we're learning to do. So, David, who the hell are you, man?
Hey, everyone. My name's David Issa. I'm a digital strategy consultant. I work with a lot of individuals and companies on what is now AI transformation initiatives. Before, we would just call that digital transformation. So that's a long, fancy way of saying, how do I, leverage modern technology to make my life better?
Fair enough. My name's Jeremy. I am a product builder at my studio, Robot Heart. By we, I mean me and my army of robots build custom software, 0 to 1 products. And then I also do AI training for product managers, designers, and anyone who's wanting to build something for themselves. That's who we are. Okay, but what are we going to talk about today? Today we are going to talk about notes. Note-taking, your app. So if you watched last week's or 2 weeks ago's episode about Dropbox and file storage, this is kind of an evolution of that. As we finished up that conversation, got into the idea of, this idea of like where information is roughly stored as the information becomes more valuable. And so we got into the idea of kind of note-taking and how notes are evolving into context. Right, where they started as something that might have been something you go to retrieve, and now it's all of a sudden something that needs to be used in a different context. So I'm going to start by asking you, David, what is a note?
It's a great question, right? When is a note and a note a file?
Right.
I feel like in my mind, notes got started because we needed a watered down version of Microsoft Word.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's right.
Right. To me, the way that I've historically used notes, especially, like Apple Notes and some of those, it's always the quick throwaway idea was yes. The original thing. It's like, oh, I need to write this down because I need to remember it. But like a sticky note, it's to be filed or to do something with later, and then once I'm done, exactly. I'm gonna toss it, right? That changed though dramatically. I would say probably 15 years ago, ish, with the rise of some of the note-focused apps that I would say started to come into the scene, like Evernote and OneNote, which I know we'll talk a little bit about.
Well, so that's actually a good place. Like, I'd love to know your note-taking journey. Like, as it changed, like, how did your note-taking journey change?
So I will say that over the course of the past 15 years, it's bounced between paper and digital consistently. Right?
Oh yeah, dude. The designer in me loves the pencil and the notebook.
Yeah, and I don't know that I've fully reconciled the two yet, but the big shift really occurred, I think, with Evernote for me. When Evernote kind of came onto the scene, and they had sort of this compelling proposition at the time, which was just put everything in here. We're here to remember everything kind of about your life. And
the logo was the elephant and meant to be like, never forget anything. It's all just this repository you can come back to.
Yeah. And that was the time when it got messy, I would say, for me. And it started to get messy because, Dropbox was on the scene, and, you had some of these other folks come up, and the world between what became a note and what became something that I'm like a file that I'm storing for later retrieval and memory. Like, now, is it a file management system, or is it note? And if you look at my old Evernote, you would see that confusion just sprayed across it.
And then you even have, like, somewhere in the middle, you've got Microsoft Word and Google Docs, which is sort of a hybrid of those things, right? It sort of sits between those, like, because in much the same way.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, I would historically, I mean, and I would say it's still this way for me is, you know, a Google Doc or a Microsoft Word doc is only getting written when I'm writing an essay or something formal.
Right. Although, you know, even for our planning of this episode and others, we're using Google Docs, and we'll get into why that is soon. Even though it's not the ideal format for this time, it has a certain element of reduced friction that makes things easy, and we're going to talk about that friction in a minute, which is actually maybe a good segue into the problem with the Notes app. So, how would you break down the current state of Note apps and kind of how they are becoming kind of a problem, or how have they been a problem for you?
So it comes down, I'm going to distill the idea down to notes as a silo. And I think, you know, this is where sort of the identity crisis and what a note app actually is comes into play.
Right.
Because it waffles between, is it my personal journal that like I want locked down, I want siloed, or more interestingly, and I think this is what a lot of like the Evernotes and the OneNotes, you know, are started to become. Is it a step in the user journey where I'm doing something that gets referenced and executed on later?
Right.
That identity crisis is where some of the challenge happened, and I think where we see some of the problem with the notes as they exist today, because they're locked in. You know, in many ways, they feel like locked in ecosystems
Because they are by design.
Yeah, and getting your data out of there, right, doesn't suddenly feel very good or easy, right? So now in a world where we're saying, and I think you started to allude to this, well, there's some things that I want private, some things I want to share with other people, and then some things that I need to share now with AI and probably even more nuanced than that, specific AI projects. And this opens up a whole new can of worms in terms of what is a notebook and as it exists today.
Yeah. So there's kind of, to break it down, there's this idea of like sort of sovereignty of like, do I have access to, is it mine? Right. Or am I locked down in this world? And then there's like notes as they exist on the user journey, where as designers or product people or anyone, when you think about the end-to-end journey and the sort of job to be done on the notebook, most of the note-taking apps just kind of stop you at note goes in. Yeah. And then that's kind of it, even though that's not really how they work. They have the information that goes in has a life beyond that, but the products stop there, right? And then, of course, like the portability, which you just talked about, of being able to move them between systems. And then finally, like the LLM piece, which is really interesting because, you know, there are certain things you want the LLM to be able to read and maybe things that you don't. But then there's also, you know, is it in the right format, right? Like, or is what you've captured mostly useless as LLM context for various reasons?
I want to be clear. I mean, I think this is something that was brewing for a while, but is really becoming a challenge today with AI. Because what we're starting to see is this idea that, okay, if AI has more context and it knows who you are and what you want and stuff, it can serve you better or achieve a higher quality result. So now everyone's looking at notebooks and all their files and everything. So how do I actually let AI know who I am and what I am? And the notebook becomes this sort of easy, user-friendly knowledge repo, like the database of the user.
Database,
right. Where it's like, well, in theory, man, if I just dumped everything into here, my thoughts, tapped it into my AI would now know who I am, much easier. But it's not as simple as that, because I say, like, when it comes to the data sovereignty, and this is where Evernote and some of these other, especially the online ones, come into play, is, well, how does it fit if I have medical records, medical receipts,
Right.
some financial stuff, and then also my knowledge, items all in it? Is all of that one notebook,
Right.
for AI to determine how and when to use it? Or if I want, and maybe I want to use AI across all those things. Does that mean I should be putting it all in Evernote on the cloud or in Microsoft OneNote? And then it starts to not feel so good, because the sovereignty principle isn't fully, that trust, I think, has been, in my opinion, eroded over the past decade or so. I think,
Right.
actually, like, you go back a couple of 10, 15 years, Google had so much user trust, and now they, like, slowly that has dwindled in quite
I
a bit.
agree. I agree. I feel like all these tools, as someone who's, we've been in tech forever, like, since we were teenagers, basically. And all of a sudden, I've been like the biggest cheerleader of it forever. And then obviously you start to see the, sort of some of the duplicity of these services. And you're like, oh shit, like these are actually terrible. I don't trust these. And I want to have all this stuff. I want to have control of all of it, have it all. And I think part of it too is like, not just, even on whether or not it's sort of like private or not, although that's a pretty big important piece, and which pieces get served into it, but also this data that I'm collecting and this context that I'm creating is really valuable now, because with a tool like these, a Claude or a ChatGPT or a Gemini, you can do so much when you have that context, and when you build that context over time, right? And as it learns more about you, and or not even learn more, but as you collect more information about the things that you're working on and the type of outputs that you're trying to create, and all that is there. And once upon a time, like the idea of big data, where these huge companies are combing through enormous data sets to mine information out, which like is valuable for them for various reasons. As an individual, it didn't really matter all that much, or didn't feel like it mattered all that much in the context of collecting data. Whereas now, it's like this stuff matters a lot, right? Because it's something, things that I'm working on, whether that's like work things or personal things or whatever. I want to have that information. I want to have access to that information, and I want these tools to have access to that information. But it's mine. I can move it. I feel good that what I want to share is what's going to get shared and nothing else. That I'm not going to get locked in, that all of a sudden some service is going to be like Evernote did to lock me down and be like, oh, you're on the pro user account now, and now you have to pay $20 a month to get your data. To be fair to Evernote, they didn't lock me out, but I basically couldn't use anything new. I was just stuck. They just changed pricing one day, and like that was that. And so that's when I left and went to Notion, which is maybe a perfect segue into the next piece of that.
Before we go on to that, I want to call one thing out, which is data portability. And I'm going to say something not good enough. Because I think all of them, right? Whether it's Evernote, Google, right? They're all going to go, well, no. We allow you to export your data. You can do that.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, I did that as somebody who uploaded a bunch of like music albums to Google Music, 15 years ago or whatever it was. And then recently I did a takeout, to kind of re-get those albums.
Right.
And it delivered a bunch of data slop. Yeah, I have the records, right? None of all the metadata is stripped out. All of it's there.
Exactly.
Somehow it miraculously is very organized in the YouTube Music app, not Google Music anymore, but so it's fine there. But then, so in theory, they did do data portability, but I have no, trying to reorganize, hundreds of albums.
It's like passive aggressive data portability. Yeah. It's like, you have it, here you go, but like, fuck you, right? And, and you can like maybe use AI to strip back out, but then it's also like, that's also part of the problem in some of these tools we'll talk about too, is like all these proprietary formats, they're just like loaded with bullshit, all the stuff that's in it. Like what is in a Microsoft Word doc, like other than the content of the document, like the file itself is full of, 30 years of Microsoft like garbage code. And then you've got, Notion and Evernote, and all these are the same, like, and all the things that surround the actual data that you care about, right? And there's just so much of that shit. And so who knows, when you exported it out of Google, how much of that came with it?
I'll be frank, like my hesitancy with Notion, because I liked a lot of the things that they were saying, and I had a lot of people try to get me to go onto it. My hesitation was specifically having gotten burned both by Google and by Evernote in the past.
Yeah.
To not want to go down that road, and that's why I ended up kind of going full sail into Obsidian. Earlier on, basically Obsidian and Apple Notes were, the two areas that I invested a lot in.
Yeah, that makes sense. Which I think a good segue. So I think what we want to talk about next is kind of go through some of the Notes apps that we've both used over time and kind of give them that tear down, from the perspective of just some of the design from it, but then I think some of these larger proc strategy questions that are starting to come up, and as the evolution of these tools happen, because the job that they need to do, the job to be done for them is changing. Who, if anyone, is actually up to the task? Who, if anyone, is keeping up?
Yeah.
So I think we started a little bit with Evernote, but maybe that's a good place to start. And I'll just start by saying, like, they were amazing when it first came out. The whole premise of it was amazing, but then I think the bloat from Evernote was a really big challenge, and you alluded to that at the beginning, where it just kind of thought it needed to, there was recipes, and then it was selling like notebooks, like physical ones, and it kind of couldn't decide what it wanted to be after a while. And meanwhile, like, the core function of like, get a note in here and be able to retrieve it later and then maybe act on it, was kind of lost.
What comes to my mind is, as designers, right? You and I, at some point, and I saw this both with Microsoft OneNote and Evernote in this context, which is, at what point does more design just become UI slop? Like, more design and features that are there. And I think what was really compelling about both of those products, and I mean, OneNote was pretty incredible in this regard as well, was the UI interactions in the beginning of the day. Like, this is when touch screens were really just kind of coming into play.
Right.
Both OneNote and Evernote were like among the first items that you could really start to just put a collage, like a design collage together, right? And I want my photo not like perfectly gridded. I'm gonna like put it on an angle, like I like taped it in there as a journal, and I'm gonna write some notes beside it. That was super cool. But the challenge is, and I would ask this question: did they ever fully get rid of the paper notebook? Because if you're not connecting that, as we talked about earlier, to what the next step in that journey is, then why would I leave the paper notebook in a way, right?
Right. Because here's like the notes, it just goes to die. It feels like this is, they want you to be, they want their application to be the end step. Like, where are you doing? Look at, this is Evernote now. I haven't used this in years, so you get a lot of dated shit in here, but like, look at all the shit in here now. Like, tasks, like, why does Evernote have a fucking calendar in it?
Look at that, man. No, not to mention, man, notebooks is like the last thing on the
right. Well, because it's like different notebooks that are different but that's different than notes, right? And then here's the thing: like, this is that sort of duplicitousness where, like, by the time they decided to change their pricing structure, I was already past the entry level. So right now, if I was to all of a sudden use Evernote right now, I click new note, upsell. I can't even use it.
You can't even get out of it.
Yeah, like, I can. No, you can. That's good. And I can get my information out. They haven't locked that down. So credit where credit's due. Like, they're not blackmailing me and saying, like, you have to do this. But like, this is a good example of a place like this Spaces concept, which is like them sort of maybe trying to catch Notion a little bit, and then like, but again, like, who uses Evernote fucking calendar? Like, tasks I kind of get maybe, but I think it gets to your point of they don't view it as a step on the journey, right? Like, this information collection and processing as like something that leads into something else. It's come here, get all your stuff in here, and then we're gonna like build this ecosystem around that instead of actually helping you like do the next thing. And it's just like, I get it on some level from a business perspective, but also it's like, this isn't, even if you're gonna do that, like a fucking calendar is not what I need then. You know, like that's not the next step in the journey here. I don't get it.
I mean, I have no idea who this is for, what they're doing, right? Like, and what I mean by that is, I have the create a new note in the top. I have the scratch pad, right in the center. As you mentioned, there's tasks, there's calendars. That's like, when should I use a scratch pad versus a task? Like, do I write a to-do there? So right. I start to like wonder, who's the user that they're going after? Is it a highly organized business user, or is it still the consumer market, that's there?
Yeah.
This to me almost feels like they want to go after ClickUp's marketplace, and you're going to.
They don't know. There is no point of view in this upgrade. Like, I can use a note, but I can use a scratch pad. Like, what does that mean? Convert to note. Oh, I can't. It's just, I don't know. This is a software that is struggling to find and maintain its relevance. I think that's like where I'm landing. So I think that's actually a really good segue into Notion, because I think Notion is in many ways the sort of progeny of Evernote, right? Yeah. It's like very much the next generation of it. It's where I went after Evernote, and basically because they tried to like gate me in this with their pricing strategy, I went to Notion. But I have a lot of feelings on Notion, so I'm going to pause for that. But like, just curious, like, have you used Notion much?
No, very lightly. This is probably good info for the Notion UX designers that are out there. My journey started with it when I was doing a move. In fact, I was moving from one house to another, and I started to use Notion to catalog like all the boxes. I created a spreadsheet in there.
That is so nerdy. Okay.
And yeah, well, it was less about that, and it was more about shipping costs.
Fair. Okay.
I needed to do this, and I was on the personal free version at the time because I was trying to get a feel for it. So I created the spreadsheet, went to share it with my family so that they could, assist me in doing all of this. And they wanted me to upgrade. So that was like strike one. Strike two was, and I was willing to kind of forgive that. I'm like, okay, like I may be willing to pay for this. Like, let me at least see if I can get all my Evernote stuff in here. That just failed every time. And maybe I had too many notebooks in Evernote or right. whatever it was. It just never actually converted over. And the problem with that is they didn't give me any other ways around it. So like, as an example, individually, like I could sync it and then I could select the notebooks to go through it. But if I maybe it would have worked if I did it one by one, right? But there was like no guidance there. So like after I tried it 3 times and it broke, I was like, you know what? This is also giving me like another data lock-in vibe. Like I'm just
very much
right. And I'll bring up the third thing. Like I touched upon this in the item. It's I still question, and I'll tell everyone, what ended up happening was that spreadsheet ended up getting recreated because I had to recreate it. I couldn't copy and paste it, ironically.
Of course not.
It just got created and stored in Google Drive and shared.
Yeah, right. That way. The lowest friction wins always.
Yeah,
always. Yeah.
Well, it's just, am I now forcing my wife to get a Notion account just to go view? Well, yeah, like that's where the sharing conundrum comes into play, right?
And that's where we get into the idea of this like portability and sovereignty. It's like, okay, you're stuck in this thing. It's just another account, and I feel like there's a lot of account fatigue. I certainly have it now. Oh yeah, it's like I don't want another fucking thing.
Look at your phone screen.
No,
how many apps?
No, I don't. I made my phone black and white, so at least like it doesn't, it doesn't like constantly beckon me with colors, which for as an aside, actually helps, and I recommend it. Um, cool. So yeah, Notion, I have a lot of feelings about because I moved it over to Notion from Evernote, and actually found that my migration worked pretty well, if I remember correctly. This was many years ago now, so I could be misremembering for sure, but I don't remember that being a point of friction, and it worked pretty well. I think, and I used Notion for a long time, and I even still use it now. And I've got a lot of things. I've never paid for it, right? And so that's one thing. But it was pretty good for it. I think the reason that I could never fully commit to Notion is that I just felt like I needed like a PhD in library sciences to understand how to use it. It's a super flexible tool, and you can do a lot with it, which is really impressive. You can publish like websites and wikis. You can make databases. You can create, basically, write documents, publish them, share them. Right? There's this collaborative feature. You can actually create spreadsheets and databases, and like these nested hierarchies of everything. And it's really cool. And that flexibility is really powerful. But it's also, in many ways, it's weakness. It has no opinion about how you should use it, and therefore, like, I think one of the things I always struggled with is it sort of forced me, and it put the onus on me to organize everything and structure everything. And then I would just forget how I did it. I'm not like one of those inherently organized people. I'm like, the shit's in there. I'll find it. And like their search is all right. So it tends to be fine, but then it forces you to create hierarchies that just feel unnecessary, unless you are one of those people who likes that. And there are people who are. It's like, and for those people, I'm sure what I'm saying is heresy to them. But for me, it's just like, it's way too complicated and way too much, way too many features for what it's meant to be. And then interestingly, like, but not good enough in any one of those respects. Like, for instance, like I've like published a web page with Notion, but the web page, like, it's kind of shitty. Like it looks like a Notion page, which is like, for a help desk or whatever, it's fine. Right.
Yeah.
But, you can only go so far. So it's like a half-ass version of kind of each of the products.
I feel like they're, from outside viewer looking in, like I see the potential power in Notion being the personal database
and at an enterprise level. I have a client now that uses Notion as their shared source of truth for as a database, and it's very powerful for them. And so I want to give, like, in many ways, like, I am not the user in that context.
So
it's important to call it out.
Congratulations to them. They actually created the SharePoint killer.
Right.
Right.
But, but at the same time, this same client, I would argue, has very much like outgrown Notion. Like they're not going to change, but they should,
What caused them to outgrow it? Is it like disorganization or?
Yeah, it's just, you have to, because it doesn't have a point of view, and because of its flexibility, like, you basically have to have someone whose job it is to manage it.
A Notion administrator.
Yeah, and which they have, and so because it's a lot of people coordinating with a lot of information, and Notion worked really well for it. It has that flexibility. You can get it off the shelf. It's like really cool in that way. And from like the LLM, from the AI and LLM perspective, like there's an MCP now. You can connect in and out of it. It's pretty cool. Like they're trying to do things for it, but like you're into that lock-in problem. And for example, if they did want to change out of it, like I don't know how they would, honestly, at this point. Like I don't know how they would get all this information out of it.
I think that's where we get into, and we're touching upon this, which the personal notebook or the enterprise notebook. And like,
right.
In some ways, these intranets, and everybody's just trying to solve a collaboration problem is right. Really what it fundamentally comes down to. But
that's such an interesting way to put it, because right now, I think what we're talking about at the personal level is still a collaboration problem, because it becomes us collaborating with Claude or ChatGPT. Whereas, then you have a situation where a perfect example is design language and acquired taste. What we're doing here, like you and I, it's just you and I, and we use the AI tools to help us with this. But like we still have a coordination problem. Like we plan some of this in Google Docs. We have markdown files with other things. The actual writing happens in Substack. It's like all over the place, and it's kind of a mess. And there is no like easy place for us to just kind of start without it being something that requires a ton of setup. Like Notion, you need to be like Notion. You need like a database administrator for Notion.
Yeah. I was going to say not yet, but I mean, in theory, right? Like where things are, and perhaps you and I should experiment this and then report back on it, which is, we could set up a open claw agent that we throw the ideas at, and like it keeps us in sync. Like I think that's sort of where that world is heading a little bit, right?
Now, I agree, but it's only as good as the shared context, and I think that's where these note things come in. It's like
a shared agent, or is it a
well, and then if you and I both have notes, like let's take this episode, right? For example, right? We use Google Docs because we can put it in, we can edit, we can comment, we can talk to each other, right? But if we had that OpenClaw thing, and I have a version of it on my desktop, and you have a version of it on your desktop, and you've got an OpenClaw agent that's sitting across it, like who's right? Yeah. Like what's the source of truth? Who's right? Like those files are out of sync, and so you have the agent looking at different contexts for the same thing. And all of a sudden, you're going to have that conflict, and it's going to have to figure out like what's what.
So this is where I think Obsidian comes in. And can kind of be interesting, right? Because like in using this example, and I know we weren't necessarily planning on going down this road, but you can set up a separate central like Obsidian vault, right? That has an agent that our agents then collaborate against. I still think that, this now is still like well beyond the user, it's not productized for the average user today.
Right.
But I think that product's around the corner. Right. And where Obsidian starts to kind of become a lot more interesting than it was, when it first came out, is its ability to easily like feed into that world as the central like database to store these documents in a machine like markdown, easy readable formats that can get translated into a UI for the end user and easily consumed by the AI agent, all the while respecting data and personal sovereignty as determined by you.
Exactly. Because it's at the end of the day, Notion isn't a notes app in the way that we've thought about it. It's really just like a text editor.
Now
right? that sits on.
Yeah. To be fair, that flexibility though definitely came, I would say, at a complexity of setup cost that probably hurt Obsidian in the early days, and like is now I think becoming more of a superpower for them.
I could go either way. I use it. I find it like very confusing to use. Like it's got all these. It's for example, like let me pull up. So I've got like our design language folder, and we share this on GitHub. It's not very well maintained or upgraded, but I don't mind our several viewers seeing what's here, right? So you've got this down here, and I love like that's got the file types, and then if it has nothing, this means it's a markdown file, right? And you can do that.
Did you connect this to GitHub directly?
The directory is connected to GitHub, right? So like it's not connected to GitHub specifically, but like the folder or the vault is connected to GitHub.
Just that flexibility though is already pretty incredible.
Right, but you can't do that from here, right? I have to go into the repo, either in terminal or Claude Code, to actually like connect those things. And then you still have that, then you still have this like, creating like PRs, and you still have a whole GitHub sort of DevOps flow, right? Which is, it's not impossible. Like you and I do it, but it's certainly not for the non-designer. The non-developer, really.
Agreed.
It doesn't have that piece. And I know there's like an Obsidian cloud piece to it, but there's a lot here, like this canvas and the daily note and the templates and the command palettes, which I think is just shortcuts. But then there's also this, which is different than this or this. So I don't know. I think that there's a lot here in terms of where it doesn't, again, have an opinion about how you should use it, which on the one hand, it's a text editor, so it's fine that it doesn't. But on the other hand, it is trying to do a lot of other things over here, right? Like this, the whole graph concept, is interesting. And I guess we don't have enough information to make it useful, but like, what is this for? And so it's one of these things that I think makes it challenging. But that being said, I think we're getting into the weeds of something where we zoom back out. I think the powerful piece of Obsidian is that this is a directory driven application in that it's using local files on your computer, right? It's no different than opening a file, kind of like how we used to do it back in the day before the cloud took over everything. You have local files on your machine, you open up, you edit them here, you can save them here, and you have them and control them. I can look at these files in Obsidian. I actually tend to use like IDEs like Cursor to actually read these files, these markdown files. Right, and everything is in this markdown thing. If you don't know what that is, Google it. But it's very cool and very easy to learn, and it gives you the ability to kind of control that. And then again, you can move it across anything. It can move in and out of any LLM. If you switch from ChatGPT to Claude, if you want to move from Obsidian into Cursor or into VS Code, like you can do that. Right, so it's really flexible and really interesting. I think the challenge, of course, is like this is all still just local context on my machine. And you don't really have access to it in any easy way. And our any sort of shared AI capability doesn't have access to this in any useful way. And I feel like this still gets into the problem of like, what happens next? Like, I've got this data, what happens next?
And to be perfectly blunt, like I think that's where Obsidian is going to start to win. I don't think they've nailed it yet.
Right.
But because of the flexibility, the data sovereignty that it allows you, I think what's going to get built potentially off of Obsidian through the community or whatever is where that power can start to multiply and become easier. But out of the box, as it sits today, still kind of a complex undertaking for the.
I want Obsidian in the cloud that sits on top of Dropbox. Right? Like Dropbox should just make a markdown editor that works like Obsidian. That'd be amazing.
Yeah. So
with an MCP, done.
I mean, but so Obsidian does that basically, right? They have the Obsidian sync.
Right.
You alternatively could just store your Obsidian vault, which is the folder structure in Dropbox, and then you would get that same effect.
And that's what we're basically doing now, right? We have this shared folder in Dropbox. So should you need to use it, but then of course, like you run into challenges with like overwrite conflicts and things like that, but it's few and far between. But again, that's just because it's you and I, but at any sort of organizational scale, like that's not going to work.
Yeah. But let's go back to my example before, right? Where, I have health records. I have, all these things. The way that an application like Obsidian works, and this is where I think, a lot of the potential comes in. I can have a separate vault, which basically means a completely separate book, right, for just my health stuff. And then a separate one for financial, and then a separate one for personal, and a separate one. And then that doesn't preclude, though, from me having an AI agent that works kind of across all three of them.
No, exactly. Right. Because it's just like directories, effectively, so you have a directory that's like, this directory is now I'm giving the AI access to this directory to work inside here. Right. And that's where you do it. Or you can look at it at like the root level if you have Claude installed on your machine.
Yeah. I say all of this because I think that the growth or the power, like when we think about what is needed or what is wanted in an AI powered world, and I'll give you the counter to this, right? When I go into Evernote or even into Notion, I don't see any desire there for them to allow me to like grab the data out of them, mix it with some other data that I have to use against, a third-party LLM, right?
No, they're trying to bring it in turn. Like Notion is doing what Dropbox is. It's like you can do it inside, and you can switch. You can. I want to use Claude or I want to use ChatGPT and use all the context, but it's like you do it in here.
but they're
right?
trying to
Not going on.
silo, they're trying to silo the data in there and sort of become the force of gravity. And I think it's the wrong move, right? But with what enterprises and what individuals, are gonna want to add. Need.
Because you see that. I mean, you just see it over time with any kind of enterprise tool. Like, it starts as something that companies start using, and it becomes effective, and it becomes part of what they're doing. But then when they eventually get shitty, and then companies want to leave, it's really hard. And then, that's when startups come and like to do the next, iteration of that, right? Like, think about, is Notion like the new like Oracle, where it's, you're like stuck in this thing, and they've like locked you in, and and it makes you annoyed. It doesn't actually add value. It just captures you, right?
I think that's a losing battle. I mean, even today, right? We could write an AI bot, with a camera that just looks at the screen and transcribes every single thing off of it. If you don't give me the ability to export, say, dial that forward. And I think, like, in an AI world, those walls, at least hopefully, in my opinion, start to break down to where, to the point where I could, control how and where things interoperate, because I think there's a space for all of them, but not if they all try to be the one winner. And I think that's where, we're getting at. Like, a lot of these companies, I think need to focus on what is the one thing we're going to win at in this larger ecosystem of things that are out there.
I totally agree. I feel like that's where Notion is losing. I feel like in Dropbox too, that same thing of like trying to build the thing and making everything happen inside their platform, because all of their metrics forever have been around engagement, right? And so like those are the metrics that they're chasing. And like the idea of interoperability has been a little bit of an anathema, because like you risk people losing, data and moving. But I feel like Notion, for example, if it could actually be this shared repository of context that you could actually like very easily get data in and out of, right? And it actually made that the value, then all of a sudden, like, that feels to me like a smarter move. But the reality is, like talked earlier, I just don't trust that that's what they're trying to do based on the product decisions I'm seeing them make.
This is also in the context of a notebook or an enterprise intranet, not, I think there's other areas where Notion could potentially grow and drive forward on, if they chose to. Like, are they competing with Squarespace? Could they go down that road? Is Squarespace encroaching on their territory?
Well, I think right now, this is a different conversation for another time. Like, but it could, because anyone can be anything right now. You can launch software and over the weekend to compete with anyone. So who knows?
Exactly.
Okay. What do you use? Like, what's your, I don't know that we ever really said it. Like, what is your today stack? Like, just in a sort of, in a soundbite.
My stack is 3 things: paper notebook, Apple Notes, and Obsidian.
Yep. It's interesting. Yeah. We didn't really talk about Apple Notes either, but I think that is a good example of very low friction, easy to use. You just like, I have an idea, I throw it in there. I just know that it's going to be there. There's no complicated hierarchies. There's no nothing. It's just a series of things in order.
I will say that's evolving, right? So I actually see Apple Notes going away in the very near future for me, based simply on the idea that what we discussed a little bit earlier. I'm setting up an agent that will capture my note via text. And store it in Obsidian, and then recall it for me later, and then delete them or refile them, when needed.
That's cool, because it's saving it as a markdown file.
Yeah, but where Apple Notes will not go away for me is with family shared notes, like weekly meal plan, right?
Yeah,
which we do a lot of the planning on, and that's because we still haven't solved the sharing conundrum.
Right. And in many ways, like for that, it works perfectly. Yeah. Right. It actually isn't presenting any problems. It's just that, it can't be all these things.
Yeah.
my stack is basically similar. I use everything in Markdown. I still have Notion because I still have information in there, but I very rarely put anything new in Notion. I say the one time that, and I don't think we talked about this, that, all these Markdown files exist locally on my computer, and it's a laptop, which is not always on. And so I think I do use Notion if I'm like on my phone, and I think that's a problem that I have yet to solve. But I think what you're talking about of like getting, now that there's more of this mobile connectivity and these bots that can maybe do that, I think that might change. But I don't use Obsidian as much. I tend to use Cursor and just use it in the IDE, and because I like having I use Cloud Code in the terminal, and then so I can see the files and the LLM itself interaction, because Obsidian just has the text and then Claude just has the interaction, and you can't see both things at the same time. Although the update of Claude now, I think you actually even can. It's every time you say anything with like the state of Claude, it's obsolete in eight minutes. So who knows? But
moving so
anyway, but that's the basic idea. Is like, I think I am moving towards what we talked about, which is Markdown files locally on my machine, editable across any platform, able to be used as context, right? And I think like that's the winning piece of it, and that the collaboration piece is still missing here, right? And then the idea for sort of LLM optimization is missing here, because a lot of it is just like garbage or random shit I've written down over the years. Whereas, and all of a sudden, the last thing you want is the LLM to like grab all that and to have some million token query that it makes, because, so how does it actually like get smarter and get better and more structured? I think those are what's missing. And there's that guy, the Andres Karpathy guy, now talking about these LLM wikis ideas, which, I think is where this is kind of headed. I think where Obsidian could play, where Notion could play, if they can get their act together or they find it to be valuable enough.
I will make one call out. I do not see paper ever leaving my stack in the future. And I say that with I think in an AI world, I may even get in using more paper, because when you think about the world where it's like, okay, I can write it down and even just snap a photo and send it to AI and it just handles it for me. I could easily see myself leaning into paper even more, with the full confidence that,
that's interesting.
That gets stored. That may be like a personal thing, but there's something tactical about the paper that.
No, because it's handy. Like, it's, we've got like my notebook's on my desk. It's right here. It's like, I don't have to remember like which thing, is it in Notion or is it in Markdown or is it in Notes or is it in, I can't even talk about like the balkanization problem of like, where the fuck is it? It's like, oh, it's in the notebook.
You'll laugh at this because it's a complete aside, but it's like, I believe that people can form relationships, loving relationships, virtually over line. But like at some point you just need a hug.
Right.
Right. And like, that's kind of the way that I think about like the paper in the mix of all of this. At some point, like the tactical, me bringing it in, being able to leverage that connection, I don't think will ever go away for me, at least.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think I would agree that more of it will, I think more people are going to, this is a longer conversation, but I think a lot of people are going to move away from purely digital experiences, especially as things get weirder and weirder.
I don't think it's a bad thing. I mean, like, when I think about AI in this context, and, we're on the cusp of AI hardware, right? That really has not broken out into the scene yet. But what that world promises in many ways is more automation and hand-holding, behind the scenes, so that you can just be more present and involved in the environment that you're in, right? So yeah, just write notes on paper. AI will automatically capture that and make sure that it's stored digitally for you later on. And this is where I go back. Like, that's why sovereignty in this world is the most important. Privacy and sovereignty is the most important piece of that, because if we want to fully lean in to where, we're not suddenly glued to computer screens all day.
Yeah.
There is a hope here and a promising future that I think AI could bring to that.
Yeah. That feels like a really nice place to land. Right? Write down things on paper, everybody. This is the end. Get a notebook and take a picture. Cool. All right. Well, we're at the 50-minute mark. I feel like we did this one. So thank you all to those of you who made it so far. David, are you going to change anything about what you've done, what you're going to do based on what we've said today, or what are you keeping an eye out for?
This has made me want to lean in further to my Obsidian setup. And if anything, I think I'm going to be looking at the way that I'm architecting that more. So what are my vaults? Where are they? I think the next thing on my to-do list is how does Dropbox and everything that's in there fit into this new world as probably a next step.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'll probably do something the same. I don't know if I'm going to move into Obsidian yet, although I am doing more now in Claude, the desktop app, versus sort of terminals and IDEs. And so I think I'm going to be using Obsidian a bit more just because I need that interface. But I'd be curious to see to what extent Claude or ChatGPT are those just become those places where they actually start to collect that stuff for you too. So I mean, I think that's a player that could emerge as well. So I don't know. We'll see. But this was a good one. I feel good.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks, man. Talk to you soon.
Bye.